Shalom. The house is quiet, and I thought, what better time than right before bed for me to go ahead and speak on this next Torah portion. I'm Dan. I want to talk to you about this portion, and it's called, in Hebrew, Ha'azinu, and it means to hear or to listen. Let me explain a little bit of what God's been showing me about this Torah portion. Again, the word means to listen to or to hear. And in this portion, this is Moses' final words. After this, he was going to look up from the mountain over all the great land that God had just brought them to. Remember, he couldn't go in because of his sin, but he was going to look over the mountain, and soon after that, the Bible tells us he was going to pass away. To think that you got so close and yet weren't able to go into the promised land, that hurts me. It makes me wonder how many times have I gotten so close to a promise, but because of my disobedience, didn't actually get to walk into that blessing that God had for me. But more importantly, it makes me kind of take a look at my own life and see, how can I prevent that from happening again? And it comes down to a simple word. It comes down to the word obedience. Moses didn't make it into the promised land because he didn't obey. Instead of speaking to the rock, he hit the rock. And so where does that leave us? Are we obeying God in everything He's asking us to do? But here we have this final chapter, Deuteronomy 32, verses 1 to 52, the whole chapter, and it's titled by many as the Song of Moses. Knowing full well what was going to happen after he wrote this, that he was going to go up and pass away, he still, at least in the end, had the obedience to write these words out as God had commanded him. Let's take a look at some of the words he wrote. Deuteronomy 32:1. He starts out by saying, "Hear, O heavens, as I speak. Listen, earth, to the words from my mouth." Now again, we know this one translates into to hear or to listen. So we see that in the first word here. Hear, O heavens, as I speak. But the question, I think, then is, what are we supposed to listen to? In this last chapter, Moses speaks that the words, that his words are like rain that waters the grass and showers the plants. He also says how great Adonai is. Look at this. In Deuteronomy 32:10 and 11, it is here that Adonai found his people in the desert. This is Moses kind of reflecting back. Here that Adonai found his people in the desert, called them out for deliverance. Call them out to him, to God, for deliverance. And what is his action? Adonai protected his people. This is all here in this text here, this short little bit. He protected his people. He still does. And hearing his name called, Adonai comes with aid and rescues us because we are still the pupil of his eye. God heard these people back 40 years ago, maybe back beyond that, when they were calling to him as slaves in Egypt, and they were calling out his name, and he heard them. And Moses is saying here again, look, God heard you, he protected you, he delivered you. And then, I love this, excuse me, in verse 12, the Lord alone led them, no foreign God was with them. I mean, the people didn't get from point A to point B, from Egypt to the promised land by happenstance. No, it's because God led them. No foreign God, no happenstance, no GPS even. It was God. God led them the whole way. And God wants to lead us. This is the great song of Moses to us, that God wants to lead us. And if we obey, not only do we get the promised land, but we get his direction to the promised land. This is good stuff. I wrote a few more notes I want to share. I can't answer for you. Just kind of shooting here a little bit. I can't answer for you. And I don't know how you feel about Adonai, whether you are a believer or you're not. And it doesn't really matter if you're a Jew or you're not. I'm just asking about you being a believer at this point. But I hope that you understand that you weren't made by happenstance, and that you weren't made just by something colliding and all of a sudden we became. No, that's not how it works. God made you. God made you because He wanted a relationship with you. That's the whole point of Adam and Eve. We studied that from the very beginning. The whole point of anything is that God wanted a relationship with His people. He wants a relationship with you. He wants to lead you out of this slavery that you're in and take you into this promised land. And you might be over here saying, God, help me. He hears you. You might be over here saying, God, I'm a slave to this addiction. He hears you. Call out. He hears you. And just like we see with the Israelites, God will deliver you and He will help you get to that promised land. So I can't answer for you whether you do or don't know Christ, whether you are or are not in an addiction or any kind of bondage. It doesn't have to be an addiction, a bondage of any sort. If we call out to Him, He hears us. So here's where I'm at. I'm about ready to hit the hay, go to bed. But I wonder if I was to pass away tonight, and I hope I don't. I don't wonder. I know if I was to pass away tonight, I know where I would be. I would be with Him in heaven. But what about you? And Moses is writing this on the brink of his death. He literally knows he's about to go and pass away. And the people that he's led this far, they're going to go into the promised land. What about you? Tonight, if you were to fall asleep and not awake, do you know where you'd be going? Moses had full confidence in God. He had this relationship with God. Do you? And more than that, Moses, in as much as he tried to, obeyed God. Do you? You know, Moses is a great story because he did mess up, and God still forgave him, and he still was God's chosen person. And yes, there was consequence, but it didn't block him from heaven. It might have blocked him from the promised land on earth, but it didn't block him from the promised land up above. So what about you? Maybe you made some mistakes. Maybe you hit the rock instead of spoke to the rock. But if tonight you were to pass away, where would you go? Still something for you to think about. Shalom. I'm Dan.